Good morning, bienvenidos. Welcome to the Public and Corporate Services Standing Committee of Tuesday, February 27th. And welcome also to the Traditional Territory of the Squamish Nation. I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda. Moved by Connie, seconded by Sue. And also looking at the committee minutes of...
I'll vote in favor.
Oh, yes, thank you. All in favor. Thank you. Also looking at the committee minutes of January 23rd, be approved. Moved by Patty, seconded by Doug. All in favor? Carries. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none. Moving on. So our first item, number 4, is a delegation. You see I'm railing there a bit late, so we're going to jump instead to number 5, business recreation program contract instructor liability insurance. And I'll hand that over to Mr. Tim Hoskins, our rep. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Good morning, committee and chair. My name is Tim Hoskin, Director of Recreation Services. Today I'm here to have a discussion with you. We have 3 motions. In short, the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia requires a council motion to be able to extend their insurance program to our contract instructors, our recreation contract instructors. So what this is, a little bit of background, is the District of Squamish, as most municipalities do, requires insurance for any contractor to deliver a program or to do work on behalf of the District of Squamish. We currently require $2 million or $5 million of insurance based on the level of risk from that work being undertaken by that contractor. But what's happening with recreation is we have a lot of contract instructors and we're currently trying to get more contract instructors to deliver programs, art programs, low-cost programs, and there's a hurdle that's ever increasing around insurance. So for us to require insurance for them to go purchase insurance can range from $300 per year to a couple of $1,000s. And as most of these people are hobbyists or just passionate about delivering a program, they often just tap out and do not wish to deliver a program. In recognition of this, the municipal insurance program developed a program, it's fairly new, to extend to contract instructors, similarly that we have for staff, for volunteers. The contract instructors, recreation contract instructors, can fall under the municipal insurance program. It's relatively low cost. It's $250 per year. It does expose our deductible of $25,000. We haven't had, in my knowledge, any major or even small claims. I believe there was one in 2010 or 2011, but we're unsure actually if that was ever settled or anything actually came out of that. So some impact that will happen from adopting this program is we will be able to take about, I have the exact number, but I believe it is 15 of our current programs, so that's not 15 instructors, but 15 of our current programs out of about 80 would fall under this. And of course we are trying to attract new instructors, primarily at the 55 around arts, and to have these low-cost programs, and we're hoping that taking away this obstacle, we will be able to have more. That is it in a nutshell. We do have a policy attached to the document. This policy is to give direction to staff on who is eligible. So we have put some restrictions on eligibility so it doesn't expand and get bigger than intended. Some of the restrictions are that they are not providing a similar program elsewhere, such as being a business, are projected to earn less than $12,000 per year, and that threshold was quite arbitrary, the idea being that perhaps if it's beyond that, they can afford to get their own insurance. They do not require a business license as per our bylaw. Currently, in the updated bylaw, recreation instructors do not require the hurdle of getting a business license. Additionally, they do not qualify for insurance under an umbrella organization. So if they have insurance through their sport org or through any umbrella organization such as gymnastics, roller derby, we would ask that they get their insurance through their umbrella organization. In addition, we would only provide it to instructors that lead activities that are identified as medium or minimum, low or medium risk. We would not insure high risk activities. And the MIABC has a matrix policy document on how to identify level of risk. Any questions?
I was wondering about that, yard.
Thank you.
Doug?
So the $250, that's per year in total?
Correct.
And does your department or staff screen these programs at all? Do you vet the programs before they start? Is there some process to go through so you know what's coming?
Very much. We introduced a rigorous process in that we wanted our contract instructors to have the professionalism, the business acumen to lay out the program clearly for us, to have their risk done, their safety done, on how they're going to manage their kids, their program attendance. So that is all flushed out before we sign into a contract, and we have a very robust contract with them that we just revised probably about 6 months ago, so it's very much up to date.
Yeah. And I'll just make the comment, I kind of expected that, and I sort of just wanted that out in the public domain. But I know I was on the SODC board for a while as a volunteer, and insurance was extended to the volunteers on that board. So to me, this is quite consistent with that. I think our district at a whole bunch of different levels relies on volunteers and people that contribute time in this fashion. So I don't have a problem with this. I think this is quite reasonable.
Right.
And I just want to make sure it's clear, many of these, or most of these instructors are actually paid, correct? They're not volunteers. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't confusing.
Correct. We do have a volunteer program, but quite often there's they collect just enough revenue to cover their costs, and that's the general model that we go to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is great. I've had a number of facilitators, instructors come and speak about how prohibitive insurance can be, how challenging it can be just to want to go and work a program. So I think this is a great step. I'm glad MIA has.
Yes.
I sat on the board for a couple of years, and they're very good about slowly expanding their service and what they provide to municipalities. And so I'm really pleased that they've sort of taken this step. I think it's a good one.
Just a quick question. You said that our insurance, our liability sits between 2 and 4.
Correct. We currently require $2 million for low risk and medium risk activities, and $5 million for high risk. This insurance program provides $5 million. However, we would not be going to high risk activities to be covered under this.
Well, we are covered sort of up to that level.
Correct.
Great. Do we need to read all these individually, or can I read them all as one? All as one? Okay. So the recommendation is that the District of Squamish provide liability insurance for specified contract recreation instructors through the Municipal Insurance Association Associate Member Program, and that the District of Squamish contract instructor liability insurance policy be adopted as presented to Council Committee on February 27, 2018. And that the District of Squamish authorize the Director of Recreation Services to enter into a service provider agreement with eligible contract instructors with the provision of liability insurance through the District's liability insurance held with the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia. Second by Patty. All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I don't think our delegation is here yet. And so I think we'll move on to the LMLGA call for nominations and resolutions for discussion. Item 5.2. You want to kick that off?
I'll just
Okay, Robin?
speak to it. So Robin Arthurs, General Manager of Corporate Services, District of Squamish. So at the last Public and Corporate Services Standing Committee, Council discussed sort of throughout some topics that might be candidates for consideration of putting together some resolutions. So councillors were asked to submit what the resolutions might be. There weren't any that we received formally, like through staff. I don't know if they went to the mayor. Mr. Buxton last week, after council's discussion regarding the restrictive covenants, the building schemes in the Highlands, he drafted a document that was attached to the agenda with a proposed resolution, sort of looking towards what happened in Alberta, where the province gave the ability to municipalities, where there was these remnant, I don't even know what the right word might be, but leftover building schemes or covenants that may not be applicable any longer. I mean, we wouldn't know unless it was tested, but so to give the ability to the province, or to the municipality, which is what happened in Alberta. So that's attached. As well, Mayor Heinzman had a couple of suggestions that I'm aware of that for discussion at the table today as well.
Yeah. I don't have it. I haven't, sorry, no. So two of the things that Robin and I talked about, one was the challenge that the legislation right now allows for municipalities to provide funding to telcos to do certain amounts of phone upgrades and that type of thing, but the legislation hasn't come up to date, and it's, I think it specifies the large telcos. Legislation hasn't come up to date with regard to helping these smaller internet providers, and particularly in rural communities, and they're often done by just small IPOs that the big guys just won't go and work in these small communities, and they get grant funding from the province, from the feds. But municipalities can't actually help with these projects, and there's one that's been going on in Squamish Valley and Paradise Valley. And we can't actually provide funding to these small telcos under the legislation. So the motion would read something like, sorry, I'm just looking up. Robin helped draft, sorry, here we go. So whereas connectivity and internet options in rural and remote areas of the province will be in smaller municipalities a challenge and can add to resident isolation. I think there's possibly a piece about business competition and that type of thing in that. Whereas the grant opportunities through the province or permit or crown corporations to assist in bringing these services to the areas. And whereas local government's ability to administer these grants can be hindered by the community charter provision around local government assistance to business, be resolved that the province amend the community charter to extend the exemption of assistance to business from larger utilities and telco providers to smaller telco providers. And the wording's just open to additional editorial comments and additions to that. But looking for thoughts from council on the resolution.
I think it's a great idea. Especially as you said, because a lot of these smaller companies that, and in the smaller rural areas, no one wants to touch it. The bigger companies don't want to put any infrastructure and go out there. So in the interest of connectivity for all those people out in like Paradise Valley and wherever.
Well, I'm not the chair, sorry.
We don't even have internet to some of our communities within Squamish, so it's, I find, yeah, that's something to look forward. It's very important to be able to do that, but there's still, our First Nations community doesn't have internet connection. Speaking of smart cities, townships.
And I think that the irony here is that it's the feds and the province provide grant funding. They have the ability to actually help these small telco companies get this, what I think is, as important as any kind of communications these days. And yet the community charter is limiting our ability to reach these rural and remote communities with internet service, so.
Am I allowed to ask?
Would you like to come up to the table, please? So the mics can pick you up just for a matter of public record. Have a seat. Thank you. If you could just give us.
I'm just curious, I'm Carolyn.
Have a seat. You can join the table.
Okay, I haven't been following all of this, but when the corporations are so huge and powerful, I don't understand why, as communities and as people of Canada, we can't be lobbying TELUS and Rogers and Shaw, who are making oodles of money, to be actually, it should be something that everybody in Canada is lobbying towards these corporations to take responsibility for the people of Canada, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and it's a good point, Carolyn, but what's happening now is the feds and the province provide funding to these large telcos, and the large telcos put in fiber optics, they put in this connectivity all over the place. Once you start heading into these more rural and remote communities, you need more and more money per capita to make them happen. And what happens is the telcos just go, we don't go into that area, and there are, and it's great that these small companies want to go and do this, but it's a lost, the capital up front doesn't get recouped for ever, maybe. And so to actually put the hard capital infrastructure in of the fiber or the towers or whatever is needed to deliver internet service to that remote community. The irony that the local governments can't give money to make it happen is the challenge, and the community charter says we can't do it. So we're saying to the community charter, you let us give money to the big telcos to provide the big internet capital projects, but you don't extend it to the small telcos. And I think it's just the history of the charter. When the charter was written, internet was not what it is today, obviously. The goal of connecting the federal goal of connecting all these rural and remote communities to the World Wide Web is a mandate now, and yet the community charter hasn't caught up with our ability to help make that happen. And so we're asking for the provincial government to actually just change the community charter to allow us to do that. So, and you don't want, I think, to be honest, I think these big telcos have too much of a monopoly, and these small little IPOs are actually great, but they need the funding to be able to do it, and we just as a local government want to be able to be part of that. We can give money to a big one, can't give money to a
I
small
don't
one.
think we should be giving money to anybody. I think that these corporations have the money and they just want to get more and more profit. But actually, in the end, as the population continues to grow.
You can't speak from there, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's irrelevant.
No, I agree with
Once again, the corporations have incredible wealth. The population of the world is continuing to grow. The population of the world has doubled in the last 40 years. All of these areas are going to grow. The corporations are making incredible amounts of money. It is their responsibility, and I believe should be mandated. But it's,
It's voice into air because until the corporations
But
start
we're not
taking-
talking about the
Yeah,
corporations, we're talking about the small ones.
I know.
Sue.
So I think I'm clear, we can fund internet into our own municipality with the smaller telcos though? We can't fund any internet.
We can't give any money to businesses, but there is one small, and maybe Robin wants to speak this more
Within our
specifically.
municipality.
Within any municipality. But there is one small provision in the community charter that allows for the larger utilities and telcos to be able to fund to help provide these services to people. But it's only specific to these large utilities and telcos. And what we're saying is,
Make most, yeah.
the last mile for these remote communities being provided by smaller telcos, you need to open up a charter to allow us to facilitate those
Yeah,
projects.
level the playing field,
Yeah.
essentially, so that you don't have to be one of the large telcos. You can be a small service provider who's willing to carry the service out, just to level the playing field. Because right now, we cannot be a flow-through for the grants, because that's part of the problem, is that the grant funders require a flow-through. They won't give the money directly to any of the providers, so we want the ability to be able to do it.
And I think the important thing is that this falls in line with our digital strategy. It also falls in line with the council strategic plan. And it's also helpful to the community to keep everybody connected. whatever reasons, whether it be.
Can I suggest that she just sit down instead of just looking down?
I'm not sure if this is my place, though.
Well, it is now.
The committees are very inclusive. If
Yes.
anyone
Great to
wants
have you.
I'll just sit here the whole time and then
There
I
you
don't have to get up and down. The other thing that I'm going to say is that little people continue to sell out to bigger people. So if all the municipalities are putting money into the little company will eventually get so much money that they'll probably sell out for money, and it'll be from the bigger corporations. That's what it seems that history has dictated. So many little people want the buck and they sell out. So do you have any guarantee that these little companies that you're actually going to help with extending services actually not sell out once they've actually get the bigger profit? So in that case, the monopoly people win in the long run as well.
Unfortunately, I think you're right, and absolutely, there is no guarantee that they won't sell out. I don't know that there's any way to mandate that. It's just that's a business plan and a business proposition. But I think for us in particular, it's just making sure that at some point that those people in those smaller areas and distant parts of the community are able to have that connectivity. Patty?
Yeah, for me, it's about providing that service to those rural and remote communities that can't be done now. We can fund the big telcos now. Through the community charter, we can help facilitate a big infrastructure project. We can't help a small telco with an infrastructure project that delivers internet and telco services to rural and remote areas. So this isn't about us trying to rejig capitalism or anything like this. This is simply about trying to provide internet service to our rural and remote, and a piece of the legislation that's preventing some of these projects from going forward.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, it's a matter, for me, it's a matter of widening the exceptions to the general rule that we can't provide assistance to a business to allow this to occur, because there are programs of just passing off money to sometimes large or small companies to do business. And I don't frankly care if they ultimately one day sell out to a big company. I think the goal of all of this is to provide the service to the people in these remote areas. And we also run into this in the regional district. It's a problem all over BC. And so this will just, we can widen that definition. It allows municipalities and local governments, where appropriate, to assist in this process to get that service to these people. Otherwise, they won't get it.
So, did you want me to talk about the second one, or COC?
Do we need a motion to include that in the O&O?
Yeah, we can do that now.
Well, let's do that now.
Sure.
Moved by Doug, second by Patty. All in favor? Carries. Thank you.
Might just a little bit of wording about,
Just give that to them, and then we should also consider whether or not to bring this forward to the special meeting tonight for ratification, so we can get them off.
we can get it up to elementary, okay.
Okay.
The next one, I'll read it off. Whereas the Local Government Act legislates the public hearing process and broadly provides for submissions to be made by anyone in the public having an interest in the matter of or the property. And whereas councils must consider all submissions made with respect to the public interest in the zoning, rezoning, OCP, and OCP amendment without an ability to verify the validity of submissions made electronically. Be it resolved that the province bring forth an amendment to the Local Government Act, which would assist the local government with the ability to verify the legitimacy of the submission, where there is strong reason to believe that the submissions are false and dishonest, and made to undermine the integrity and purpose of the public hearing process. So I think what's happened in this day and age where we have online submissions and email submissions on all of our public processes, and there's so many systems online to create false emails, to create mass emails from false email accounts, and again, it's the legislation hasn't sort of caught up with the times in terms of giving municipalities a tool to make sure that we're not compromising the public process, the public hearing process. And so this proposed resolution is to help encourage the provincial government through the legislation to give some tools to local governments to make sure we're validating or have the ability to validate submissions to the public process.
I agree. I think we have seen, I think ourselves, some of the instances of this, so we would like to see a stop to that keep things on the up and up and level. Doug?
Yeah, I guess, and I don't disagree with the intent of this. I guess the challenge will be actually how would we, as a local government, ever sift through that and find out and decide what might or might not. So, but I think the intent is good, certainly.
And it's got to come from somewhere. Susan?
Yeah, I totally agree with Doug. I'm not sure how we would ever implement anything like this, and you're gonna end up, you know, it's possible that you'll end up missing citizens' emails that you may think are false, but just maybe new. So, and you know, I totally agree that the intent is great, but I think this is a rare occasion, and I don't think spending time on legislation to actually take care of a rare event. I think that individual politicians need to weight things appropriately in order not to miss actual public feedback.
Well, I think in the day and age of botting, and I think we've seen plenty of that, you know, a single person can source out hundreds, maybe even thousands of emails and social media and all of that. I think it has to, the motion has to come from somewhere, and I think the idea that turning your eyes towards the problem is what this is crafted for. And I think it's just a wake-up call to say this can happen, it is happening, and we need to look at it, whatever the ramifications are and whatever the remedies may be, we need to start looking at it. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was quite upset on Family Day when I came through down the trail onto Perth, and there was a defense after I'd ridden council that Shima basically, in my opinion, is bullying, saying this is what we're going to do if I don't get my way. And here his son is getting petitions. There's so many cars down the road that day, it's unreal, and they're all mostly from Vancouver. And he's got them all signing this petition for his property. So I was quite upset about that, because now you have all these names that are in favor, which most of them most likely aren't even from Squamish.
Thanks for including that. Bye.
Yeah, and I hear your point, it's a valid one, and petitions are always a bit challenging for councils because you take them for what they are, you evaluate them, you put weight into them. And I think there's obviously challenging aspects to a petition, and as Susan says, you know, you weigh that as an individual in terms of how it might sway your opinion or not. I think where this one is really trying to focus in on is this electronic version of communication that is so nefarious, so easy to do. I don't think it's going to be isolated incidents. I think it's going to become the norm. And this is about starting a conversation. I agree with everyone, Susan and Doug. This is about, we're not saying go and do this. We're trying to say how do we explore opportunities for communities to make sure that the public that they're trying to serve and councils have some mechanism to help verify the legitimacy of submissions, or at least be able to give them due weight in a public process. And this is not coming up with solutions on how to do that, because I think that's a big, broad conversation. But trying to at least start the conversation about this is a real problem, and we need to have the tools, or legislative tools, to be able to appropriately deal with this type of action.
I agree. Do you need a motion for that? Move that as well?
Sure, on the
You move it, second by myself. All in favor? Motion carries. So those two items will go towards to the LNLGA.
And then we have Gary's
Does
as
Mr. Watson
well.
have something as well?
On
Yes,
the
I
agenda.
believe there's a quick memo in the, I mean, it's simply suggesting that the province paraphrase a section from the relevant Alberta legislation in the BC legislation that would allow the municipality to challenge a covenant. But effectively is taking your power as council away from you, or at least eroding it. It would be fairly easy to take that provision and write it into the Land Title Act in BC.
Sure.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics, building schemes. And so I can't remember how many of these things I've read over the years, but it's actually, and I think it's in the Land Act, not the Land Title Act, that there is provision right now, you can apply to a Supreme Court judge for an order that the building scheme be wholly or partially discharged. And there are certain grounds. And the one that's, when you talk about these older ones, is that they are now obsolete, quote unquote. But that's a really high threshold. And so If the municipality was applying instead of a single property owner, you'd still have to meet that threshold. And it's a very difficult threshold. And the fact that it's dates from 1965 or something, as some of these ones do around here, is not the answer. I mean, that's not the whole answer to it, because people might still be relying on it. And the one I'm thinking about particularly in Brackendale, the court said, well, we'll discharge this property from it because it faces onto Judd Road and it's all gone duplex already. But the covenant's still valid for the part of the property and behind there, and it was a no subdivision type of covenant. So I think allowing the municipality to make the application instead of a private landowner is part of it, but the other part you have to do is you have to widen the grounds when it might be discharged. You can't just have the present criteria for discharge. You also have to say if it conflicts with land use planning, etc., and add those things in there as grounds where, so a judge has an avenue, short of finding that it's somehow obsolete, for discharging or amending the covenant. So I think with a little work, and I think it is a different piece of legislation actually. It's not the Land Title Act, it's called the Land Act, Section 30 of the Land Act. It's one of these things that sticks in my mind. Yeah. Sorry, just fasten on some things. But you know, having gone through that process, and our firm went through it with court applications in a couple of cases, and we went all through the case law and stuff. And so the obsolete is not a slam dunk application by a long shot.
So I'll move that we include that item as well to LGA. Second by Sue, all in favor? Motion carries. So those will all three be brought forward to this evening.
And maybe Councillor Rees can work with Gary a little on that.
Yeah, if I can
Yeah.
adjust that memo, draw on
That will
council's
geek it up.
vast expertise.
Okay.
Which is slipping away quickly.
Thank you very much. And I see that Ms. Young is here from CNRail, our delegation. So if you'd like to come up and have a seat.
I actually have a colleague with me.
Terrific.
This is Dylan Jansen. He's the assistant superintendent for your region. So where would you like us to sit? Down
Right
here?
there. Anywhere there is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Joslyn and I go way back. She was executive director of LMLJ when I was on the board and president, and
Yeah.
she's a lovely person.
And 13 years at UBCM, so you might say I've heard about a few local government issues, worked on a few resolutions.
Just a few million.
How many are you sending to LMLGA this year?
3 so far.
3? Not bad. Not bad.
Gold star, gold star.
Well, I'll be sure to read them, see what they have to say. So thanks so much for having us, and sorry for being late. Vancouver traffic, I don't have to tell you, it was a little bit dicey. Like Mayor Heintzman said, my name is Joslyn, and I've been with CNRail in the Public Affairs Department for just under a year. So directly before that, UBCM for 13 years and LMLGA. And Dylan, how long have you been with CN?
I've been with CN for 5.5 years, going on 6 this year. Started from a conductor position, yard master, train master, now assistant superintendent. So being through the operations, being on the ground before. So.
And this is his region, so he's the guy that knows what's actually happening on the ground.
Place to come from.
Yeah.
So you guys had some questions that you sent to us. Do you want to just go through them one by one? Do you want to ask? Do you want?
Let's just go through them.
Okay.
Sure.
Do you want me to say what was done? Okay.
Yeah.
So first question was, Squamish gets complaints regarding shunting and train idling activities in the North Yard. Can you provide an overview of city policies around these activities and why they occur during sleeping hours? Now, Dylan can go into further detail. Trains do run 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Our scheduling, we would love to work just during the day. In fact, a lot of our colleagues would enjoy that. But much of our scheduling is affected not only on a North American scale, because we're the only railroad that goes to 3 coasts. And so you've got, the traffic coming from Chicago and going out that way. We are also affected by the ports and the terminals and their time frames. So we can't show up just whenever we want to at a terminal. So the work that we do at night is to get us ready for whatever time we need to be there. Do you want to go into some more detail of
Yeah,
the
so-
inner workings?
Two main factors in servicing Squamish Yard, Squamish terminals here is their hours of operation. So they're working to unload boxcars of pulp, loading in coil, intermodal trucks during the daytime hours, typically ending around 17, 18 o'clock, depending on how many crews they've ganged up for the day. Our crews are based on when they're going to release the cars back to us to pull, when they need the cars spotted by, so they can work the next day.
Spotted means bringing to them.
Yes. And also power availability. So with Squamish Terminal servicing hours, we've arranged it for locomotives to arrive at a certain time with our online meets coming from the north in Prince George, and also from our train that transfers back and forth from North Vancouver. So between locomotive availability and Squamish Terminal's service requirements, the evening is our only time to service the yard.
Any other
Alright.
additional questions on that one?
Fine.
Sorry, you said something about loading in oil. Can you just-
Loading in coil.
Coil.
Oil.
Yeah.
You like that much better.
Loading in oil, and I'm like,
Robin?
So one of the frequent complaints that we get is around the idling and the policies around idling. So what our residents that live in the immediate area, are finding is that we hear about the policies and we refer them to CN, but the policies aren't being necessarily followed as to temperature. So, and, 48-hour idling of engines. So the residents have been asked to monitor and log, and they do, and they submit, but it doesn't seem to change. So if you could talk about those policies and when CN may not have to follow them, when it is a higher temperature, +3, and there's still 48 hours of engine idling.
Yes, so our current policy is once the temperature averages below 10 degrees Celsius, locomotives must remain running. As a coolant in our engines, we use water. With that in mind, if the locomotive were to shut down, the pipes would freeze, the locomotive has to go to a shop in Transcona, which is Winnipeg, or Prince George, to be defrosted, have all the cooling systems checked for cracks, any damage, etc. So once we hit below an average of 10 degrees Celsius, locomotives must remain running. If we exceed 10 degrees Celsius, they're going to be shut down if left for any more than half an hour.
So is 10 degrees is a new threshold then, because that's not the threshold the last time we were told 3, I think, 3 degrees or something.
Yeah, it's 10 degrees.
Okay, so that's a good to know
Yes.
change.
Right?
10 degrees seems ridiculously high. I mean, you're not even close to freezing at 10 degrees.
This is our policy from our motive power directors, and
I'm questioning your policy. The other thing is, when you say average 10 degrees, is that over X amount of days or X amount of hours, or how do you determine what that number?
well, along the lines, we have hot box detectors which indicate the temperature of the region. So inbound to Squamish on the north end of the yard, we do have a hot box detector. If that detector's going off anywhere above 10 degrees, the crews know it's above. Any stop more than half an hour, locomotives must be shut down. If leaving them for the evening, shut them down, and then they won't be started until the next crew's on board.
As long as it's above 10 degrees.
Yes.
So it was just the average of 10 degrees. Do you take that over a certain amount of time? Like, you needed.
Well, I shouldn't have said average, I
Average,
should have
okay.
said the temperature at the time. It should
Okay,
have-
it's a spot temperature.
Can you explain a little bit, because I found this interesting, the air brake system and how that's attached to the engine, and no matter how many times it's explained to me, it's still, like, if you have to run the engine for the actual brakes to work along with.
Yeah, so the compressors also, if there's ever a time where we have to leave locomotives tied up on the main line outside of the yard limits, as per Transport Canada, we must maintain two modes of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Braking systems.
Yeah, two forms of protection to prevent from rollaway. So primarily it's handbrakes and air brakes. And in order for the compressor in the locomotives to maintain the amount of air in the brake system, that engine has to be running. If not, it'll use what's in the reservoir to hold it. But once that slowly fades away, then we're out of air.
Sorry,
There's, for example, right now, there's a whole slew of cars parked in Paradise Valley. There's no engine on that, they're just sitting on the extra lane.
Yes.
So it's obviously got a different type of brake system on it than a locomotive.
Yeah, so they're
the air brake is
derail-
only on the locomotive.
Yes. So when we leave those cars there, we have two forms in the terms of handbrakes as well as derails in the siding as well.
Derails meaning,
Derails meaning it's a device that goes on the rail to protect from any potential rollaway. The car will climb the derail and put itself on the ground to prevent from coming onto the main line into public crossings.
I actually witnessed one in Paradise Valley about 13, 14 years ago, before CNN. CN was on this particular route.
Yeah, Tom?
Yeah, I'm just curious, is the engine heat, which has to be 10 degrees, and the two braking systems related?
In the form of the engine has to be running with a
Yeah.
cooling system as well as maintaining the brake pipes. So
But it was above 15 degrees, you wouldn't have the engine running, right? At
No.
all, so then you're gonna end up with these.
then you
so-
would have handbrakes and derails to protect. You'd
Yeah.
find another form of protection.
So these two factors are totally independent situations we're talking about.
Yes.
So can we not suggest maybe a new policy of 5 degrees? Like 10 degrees just seems ridiculously high in my opinion, especially when we're at ground level in Squamish. Is that possible?
When you've got, so you've got conductors and locomotives running across North America, so you have to have a standardized set of rules regardless of where you are. So because you might have someone coming from Montreal and they've never been to your yard before, you need to have consistency so that there's no safety rules broken, right? So if there's a standard set in place that works across the country, then your safety status goes higher. And our goal is to be the safest railway in North America.
I would just think in this day and age of technology, when so much is possible, that you could actually maybe change the policy to actually reflect the area you're going into. I don't think you need a substandard.
We are investing in higher level locomotives all the time. This year we announced a $3.2 billion CapEx program. So investments in just our infrastructure and power, that's what we call the locomotives. So, you know, you think of all the technology that's in the world and you expect the railway to be operating like a cell phone company. The amount of money it takes just to run a railway, you're not actually going to be at the highest level of technology available all the time. It takes time to get to that area, but of course that's the way we want to go because it's going to be more efficient. Anything we can do to be more efficient, more timely, that's what we want for the whole organization, right?
I don't know if you have it today, but if you could send us a rationale for 10 degrees, I understand wanting to have federal standards. I mean, 10 degrees isn't, I mean, that would be, you know, 80% of the days that you're going to be
Right.
able to idle for no reason. I mean, the amount of freezing days in Squamish in a year are pretty minimal. We don't want to jeopardize the rolling stock, but 10 degrees is really high. And as Robin said, I think the last time CN was here a couple of years ago, they said it was 3 or 4 degrees. And I don't know if that's been a change since some of this stuff with Mathematique or other things happening.
Maybe.
But 10 degrees is, I mean,
Yeah. The Rail Safety Act review may impart a new standard, I don't know, but I can look into that
yeah,
and
because
let you know.
10 degrees, literally, I mean, it'd be interesting to know, but 3/4 of the year, we're going to be below 10 degrees.
Okay.
But 3/4, like nine times out of 10, we're going to be well above freezing. So if for us, you could literally be idling for most of the year if this is actually the case. Is it, so 10 degrees just seems really high. That's warm. That's t-shirt weather.
And if you juxtapose across that as 10 degrees, then is also the amount of fuel spent in that island. What's the cost of that relative to?
Well, we're still 4 times more fuel efficient than trucks overall, so still winning that game.
Okay. But it is a
But
consideration.
there's a savings potential there.
Yeah. Yes?
I just think in this day and age, or after clean air and we want to be called a green city here. Just because you're more efficient than trucking doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think that, I hope you can change the policy. That's all.
We have, for your interest, we actually have been named one of the most sustainable companies in North America. We've won an award just recently. I think it's the Type 1 something. It's on our website. So we are actually making great strides in that area. Sustainable choices. Obviously, I can't tell you how much I hear about it, so it's very important to us. And I can definitely figure out what the rationale is and explain it a little further.
Thank you. And the next item?
Blocking of intersections, Buckley Avenue, for longer than the Act allows. Do we have some further details?
Oh, we've got lots
Okay.
of complaints and times and logs.
Okay.
We have a very alert community who bring infractions, because we only have one way into our downtown.
Right.
There's only one. So as soon as people are late for work
They
or
let you
doctor's
know.
appointments, they're gone. You know, their doctor's appointment is gone if they're there for 15 minutes.
Right.
And, you know, the previous discussion has been, well, you know, if they're moving, even at a snail's pace, it doesn't count. But, you know, we're talking stopped, dead stop. And everybody around this table can
To
give
be
you
clear,
an
it
example of when they've
can
sat
be
there
stopped
for 15
for
minutes.
5 minutes,
We're
roll
talking
for 30
15.
seconds,
Yeah, well.
and then stop again and still be within the guidelines. So I don't know what to say here other than, I guess back in the 90s, I was talking to our public works officer about that crossing, and he said that we'd done some changes in work back when he was with BC Rail to try to allow for some development for the city. And so that whatever changes we made brought on some more development for the city with some, whatever land might have been given up, or I don't know. And now, I mean, when I look at that area, and if you've got higher population, you know, more people traveling, I would love to understand your transportation plan for a grade separation.
Who wants to take this?
Patty, you're up next.
Yeah, so I think Robin made an excellent point. We have one way in and one way out of downtown. We do, with a development on the other side of the Malcolm One channel, MOTI has said that we need to explore an additional crossing over the Malcolm One channel. So we're just in the beginnings of investigating that.
Okay.
Another little piece of this puzzle was years ago when BC Rail Properties actually wanted to build the mall,
Yeah.
Squamish Station Mall, and it made that weird teardrop shape, and Buckley was realigned, and Buckley Crossing, which was at the north end of Dentville, was closed, and Queensway was put in.
Yeah.
Part of that original deal way back when, with BC Rail, not with CN, well before CN, was to actually pave Bailey Street, connecting the old government road with downtown. That deal never happened.
Never
It
happened.
was never fulfilled. So that's one other, there's currently a dirt road there, pretty bad shape most of the time, not up to any kind of road standard. But we do technically have that secondary access out. So we have some strategies. They're very costly ones. One's a bridge across the Malcolm One channel. One's paving potentially a road that goes right beside our estuary, which is problematic as a dirt road, let alone anything else. Anyway, we do have some strategies there. That is one of the intersections that we're upgrading as part of this year's, looking for a grant from the feds to do that intersection.
Okay.
As well as the Loggers Lane intersection and the pedestrian intersection between Squamish Elementary School and the mall, Bailey Street. Those are the three intersections we're targeting this year. And the Cleveland one is by far the biggest project, where the rail intersects Cleveland.
Yeah.
And there's an old spur road there too. So there's a lot of things that need to get fixed in there. So we're really hopeful for the federal grant to be able to do that this year.
Okay.
But, so we do have, you know, it's not just getting to a doctor's appointment. It's if there's a fire response. We don't have a fire hall downtown. If there's, you know, any kind of other medical emergency or policing emergency, if that is closed, and last summer it was closed for 40 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time. And this sort of like, the way the act is written, so you can sit for 5 minutes and roll for 30 seconds and sit for 5 minutes, I think that's really not very respectful of what the intent of the rule in
Right.
the act is.
Yeah.
It's kind of, what's the word, can't think of the word.
Disrespect.
Well,
I think
it can definitely be seen that way for the person who's sitting in their car, frustrated, missing their doctor's appointment. They're like, why is this happening? So, Dylan, can you explain what they're doing there, that activity, and then?
First, I'd like to know, is there a general time that we're seeing this happen?
We've clocked it mostly midday. Yeah.
Midday?
Middle of rush hour, like it happens all the time.
First thing in the morning, around 8:30.
There was a time in the summer where it was very problematic for a good couple of weeks. And not the usual 5-10 minutes overtime, like 40-minute closures.
Because since summer, we have changed the setup of how we operate our transfers and yarding in Squamish Yard here. Not a lot of switching should be happening at the south end over Cleveland crossing there. That's where I'm just trying to kind of get, where's our issue? Which one of my assignments is the one that's causing these issues for you? If it's as simply as my crew servicing Squamish terminals, there's only so much I can do for crew time to get them earlier depending if the locomotive's available. As for what they're doing down there, they're coming down to Squamish terminals, they're coming out of Squamish terminals. As for switching on that crossing, I can't imagine there's much because a majority of our switching is done at the north end of the yard. If there is at the south end, it would be a surprise to me, so I'd like to know that.
So maybe we could, there could be a way to keep a closer eye on the time that these things are happening, because I've heard midday and I've heard morning.
Yeah, we have it chronicled.
You do.
Yeah.
So could someone take a closer look and also perhaps it's the changes that we've made, maybe it's improved enough that it's not been an issue since summer.
It has improved since summer, for sure.
Has
But
improved.
it might be worthwhile also go through some of your logs to see, you know, your own personal logs for that area to see when and how long it has set there.
The
Pull
only thing I can
pull it out.
is looking at the crew's lists on what their work was for the day.
Yeah.
But as I said, the plan is to switch from the north end of the yard, as there is only the one crossing that way. So,
Because what we're looking at now with our downtown, the development that's going on in the downtown area, and you know, I'm sure you're aware of the oceanfront property as well, which is going to be fleshed out to the tune of about 6,500. So.
Have you talked to I know in Langley, they worked with developers who were putting in the new housing to help provide some funding toward road improvements for accessibility. I don't know if that's something that you've looked at, but I mean, keep us posted on your infrastructure funding and what you've got there. But I mean, our goal is to not do any switching there. It's to do it at the north of the yard. We've made some changes, so I'm hoping that that will alleviate the problem. But I've seen this multiple times where growth happens around a yard. There's suddenly an expectation that the activities of the yard change or don't take place anymore. And it's difficult for us because we're trying to meet all of these different demands. So you've got a community growing up near the railroad track, and then you've got the railroad track just trying to run their business, and it's about finding that balance, right? So another thing that we could do is, I know that you're giving out our public inquiry line information, and I don't know if you have that on your website as well. We would be happy to coordinate with you to.
I'm pretty sure we've added it.
Okay.
Doug?
That's helpful.
Yeah, I haven't logged it scientifically, but from my observation, when I've been stopped there, it's been a southbound train that has been back and forth. And the improvement that was talked about where the crossing was eliminated when Queensway was put through by the business park, effectively what that did is allow for longer trains, because you used to have to break the trains. You couldn't sit them there for any length of time because there was a road through it. And so when that road was discontinued, the theory was that the road that, as Patty's spoken about, on the other side of the tracks curling around
Yeah.
was supposed to be paved as an alternate. It's paved around the top end to where the old shop entrance used to be, but beyond that, you don't go very far until you run into the gravel road again. So,
And you've got an estuary over there, so.
yeah, so widening that road and taking it up to kind of road standards is problematic by itself. I mean, just the idea of pushing into the estuary to widen it and pave it, and have to build it up a little bit and so forth. If you're going to make it a travel route, a significant
Right.
travel route, right now it's kind of a disaster scenario to get through there, just back and forth. Ultimately, when you're talking about road improvements from developers, I mean, that is what's going to happen with Waterfront Landing, the development on the other side of the Blind Channel, the old mill site. They will be contributing towards the cost of the bridge across the channel. They will be contributing or paying for the interchange up to the highway, the road going through their development up to the highway, which will cross over the tracks. So ultimately, there will be a second entrance there. But even with that in place, I'm trying to visualize, I think the Buckley-Cleveland Avenue crossing is still going to be one of the most significant crossings. We'll have alternates for disasters, but it's still, most of the people will be
That's
using
their
that
route.
crossing.
Has the ministry indicated kind of where you are on their big list of funding requests? Like, are you on their 20-year plan? Are you on their 10-year plan? Have you had
Or
any?
the never plan, you mean, or depending? Well, it's not really a ministry issue. We're dealing with it locally, I think, predominantly.
For your, like for any infrastructure funding, right?
The highway is provincial. We have other
Sorry, I was
issues.
talking, I was back to the grade separation for the,
We'll be looking for provincial, we'll be looking for any
Yeah.
infrastructure, federal or provincial funding for.
I mean, often those things, everybody works together, and even the railroad is approached for some funding. Generally, the amount that we would provide it's all negotiated based on a needs basis, right? So I think what we can do is get some further details from you. If you can find some specific days where it was really bad, and Dylan can maybe go back and look at our logs and see if there's anything further we can do other than the changes that he's already made. Then we can see if there's anything more that we can do. And then keep me updated on your infrastructure funding request and just what we're looking at here. And I mean, is it fair to say that, you know, after we have some more information, we can come back and say, you know, this is, if we're between a rock and a hard place with the terminal, if it's us, if it's them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so then we could look at making some potential further changes if it's suitable.
Go ahead, you, and then
If you're living in the north, I'm pretty sure you can't be blocked in as you are in the south, am I not correct? So if you've already made the change so that all that stuff happens in the north, then just make a policy that there is no work happening in the south so that you never block the lane. I don't see why that'd be so difficult, but you can always block the other way because people have two choices.
Yes, so the other side is where we're doing primarily our switching in the yard, blocking of traffic to destination. The south end would primarily be servicing terminals or arriving and departing trains. So there's no way to eliminate it all. What I'm trying to now find is there a time frame that we're primarily there, which assignment can
okay.
Yeah, and these things seem to go in cycles a bit. There seems to be some sort of process of protocol change. It gets bad, we make complaints, you guys react, it gets better. So I think being able to anticipate these problems a little bit more before they happen is part of the key. To understand that maybe some of your shifting stuff may have an effect, have a conversation with our staff to say, hey, we're going to try to do a different type of shifting. Let us know if we're blocking, you know, try to anticipate a little bit more than just making a change and going, seeing if there's a reaction.
Who's the person that we should?
Robin, would that be?
So Robin, let's get in touch and make sure that
I made a note.
operations has your contact info. We do, unfortunately, there's changes in, you know, Dylan may not always be in his role, so he'll have developed a relationship with you and understands your needs, and then you end up with a whole changeover of staff, and you've got a new track master and that kind of thing.
That happens.
And then you kind of lose that flow, right? Because being federally mandated and regulated, we of course follow those rules, but we try to be good neighbors and come up with solutions that work in each community. So then it's kind of hard to log, because in Squamish you might be doing this, and Chilliwack you might be doing that, Prince George might be doing that. So that's where the people and those relationships come in.
Yes.
So we can maybe set you up as well with, not just Dylan's phone number, but maybe another main line or something, and the right wording to use to make sure that we're talking about the same issue.
We had a great relationship with Mike Peterson when he was here, and he was a direct phone call, and it was on it. So that's the kind of relationship I think that to foster for sure.
Quick one, then we're going to move on to the next
Yeah,
item.
when we actually have a long-term relationship with you people, I don't think it matters who's in the seat. I don't think we should have to go through this every single time there's somebody new. The policy should be that you've already come up, that you do your shifting in the north. It's a no-brainer.
I think what he did was he addressed the switching happens in the north, but coming in and out of the terminal, actually, we don't always control that.
But you do your best, and all the people who work for you, everybody who works, communication is so huge. It's just like, the people who blow the whistles. Some people will just do a couple little things. Some people, I think, take great pleasure in blowing that whistle as long as
let's move to that question.
It comes to communication and expectations and respect. And I think those three things is what is a company. It doesn't matter who's sitting in the seat.
Well, actually, if I
We'll
may,
segue into the next one.
whistling. So whistling, there are regulations on when and how the whistle should be blown. And so someone who is not actually doing the full amount of whistling could actually get in a lot of trouble for not doing that, because there are standards set by Transport Canada that should be followed. I think it's a quarter of a mile before a crossing, the whistle sign is there. So if you've got 3 crossings within a close distance, it might seem like they're whistling the entire way through just to wake you up, but in fact, they're actually following Transport Canada regulations, which we have no control over. So that's...
With that,
Sir, through the chair, please.
Jeff Lee, I'm just a Squamish resident here, but I work up in Whistler.
Okay, John.
So my concern is with the whistling, what about, and you guys are focused on safety, which is great with the whistling, if there's wildlife or people on the tracks, heaven forbid at 2 in the morning. But what about for us residents that live in Squamish that have to get up in the morning, drive that Sea to Sky highway, sometimes in a snowstorm, when we don't get an ounce of sleep because of these trains that are whistling? And it seems like from my experience, my fiance's home at all during the day, doesn't hear them at all during the day. It's always between the 2 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. corridor.
So,
And I've got, on my phone here, I can show you how loud it is from our bedroom.
yeah.
And when you're in a deep sleep and you get woken up, your adrenaline's going, your heart's pounding, and then you're just anticipating the next train and the next train. Next thing you know, it's 5:30 in the morning, I gotta get up and go to work.
Well,
And
I don't know.
so my concern is if there's an accident and I'm injured, is CN liable?
No, because we didn't choose where you built your home, or you just chose to live. And yeah, I have an issue with the real estate industry on that whole front. But so when it comes to whistling, so the regulating body is called Transport Canada, and they have rules as to when and where that's in place. A community has the option of applying for something called whistle cessation, but that will cost your community quite a bit of money, because they have to make sure that each crossing is protected in a certain way, so that includes infrastructure, and they have to go through a lot of steps to get that. Somewhere like New Westminster, that has 4 railways coming through downtown, they have whistle cessation in place.
North Van, they do all across.
And so if you see a lot of crossbucks and all bells and whistles and whatnot, chances are they put whistle cessation in place. Even if whistle cessation is in place, if something dangerous looks to be nearby, they do have to blow the whistle, of course. So that would be our answer, is we have to follow the rules and blow the whistle unless whistle cessation is in place.
But it goes back to whoever made the comment. Sometimes it's so excessive, and other times it's like, and it's the same path they're going on.
Yeah.
So, you always hear these stories that, and that's probably not true, but some conductors had relationships with a woman in Eagle Wind, and next thing you know, he's blowing excessively just to wake her up. I hear those stories.
We actually know some good stories. That was BC Rail.
Oh my God.
Just a quick question, you talk about whistle cessation and the modus around that and the equipment that goes with that. What's the average, just if you picked a one crossing, what would that cost to do a piece of whistle cessation?
I've heard everything from 400,000 to $1 million bucks.
Per. Thanks. Doug?
Can you tell me the definition of a crossing, please?
There's private and there's public crossings. I'm not the crossings guy.
What's a crossing?
But
A crossing is any at-grade crossing where the public roadway and railway crosses.
Okay, so I'm in Kingswood,
Okay.
where the overpass is, and that is not a roadway. And you guys, it has been being blown forever. There's cement, there's the little yellow things, no cars can go through there, so can you please stop blowing there, please?
There is a public right of way there. It's not just, roadway is not just where cars can go.
Yeah.
It's
If a walker can, if someone can walk there and there's no whistle cessation in place, we have to blow the whistle.
Okay, just blow it once. I mean, there's signs.
They are
You've cut away all the trees.
Yeah,
You have yellow rails.
Yeah,
People at some point have to
it's
take
not up to us.
responsibility
I
for
wish
their
it
own
was.
actions.
I wish it
Okay.
was up to us.
Thank you.
I wish it was.
Yeah, so we have 22 railway crossings in Squamish, and that includes the pedestrian ones as well. Most of them are roadway. We did look at cessation programs for a couple of the intersections that neighbors in the area around Animal Path and stuff have looked at doing whistle cessation. And it's, as Joslyn sort of alluded to, it's fencing, it's gates, it's lights, it's warnings, it's sight lines, they can be very, very, very expensive.
And you have to get a contractor to like scope the whole
You have to
area
get
and
an
give you the
engineering
recommendation.
report on
That right there will
We
cost
did
you,
that.
50
Yeah,
grand.
we did that for a couple of them. I think it's very expensive. Right now, we're in this, the provincial government has mandated that all rock crossings across Canada come up to a certain standard. So we've been over the last couple of years, every year doing 2 or 3 crossings. This year we have the Loggers Lane, Cleveland, and the pedestrian crossing from Squamish as part of our, we just talked about it, this year's capital. We have to get all the crossings up to standard. And I think once we finish that program, we need to get into a systematic program of cessation. If in the meantime we want to do a cessation crossing program outside of it, it'd be great if citizens, and if you've got citizens in your neighborhood to come together and say, hey, this demonstrate how it's disrupting your life, and we know it's disrupting your life. There may be, some crossings may not be very expensive, particularly if you're not looking at major road improvement works that have to go along with it. If it's a pedestrian crossing, maybe there's a simple and relatively inexpensive way of dealing with that particular situation. But it is really based on individual crossing by individual crossing, how much it may or may not cost. But that one may be one, I just don't know how more challenging, more expensive that one would be compared to another one.
Yeah, for me, we're right at the end of Bailey Street there, it's the gravel road, right in front of the Park House building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the
Oh,
one.
you're downtown,
Yeah.
and you're in you're Bracknell, right? You're downtown.
Doug?
Yeah, we looked at that in my first term and commissioned a study on how much it would cost. And that was 2010, so several years ago. But it came out at around $250,000 a crossing. And that's not including road improvements. That's just the bells and whistles and gates and so forth to come up to the standard at that time. And so we didn't proceed. It was just too expensive because there was, I'm thinking somewhere between half a dozen and 10 that would have to be built up like that to do it, and it was just too much to bite off.
And that's a lower cost, and communities will often get given a quote, and if you as the community select the lowest quote and then something happens, because there's always more you can do when it comes to safety, and something happens, then you're also in a sticky situation as well, right? It's a difficult subject for sure. But right now, Transport Canada makes those rules for all of us.
So if by Transport Canada's rules you did the bare minimum and then something happened at that crossing, then the district would be liable?
I don't think that they would be. I'm not from regulatory, but I've heard of unfortunate situations happening where nobody came out a winner, and the community had done what they were supposed to do, but sometimes it comes down to people's choices as well, and you can't control everyone in your community.
Right?
Yeah, one point I forgot to make was the consistency of the blowing, I think is a point that I was trying to, and I've heard it too, and it really ranges, and some is excessive and some probably isn't enough. So it's great to get, actually, maybe we can even put that on our website, what the expectation is.
Sure.
3 seconds or 3 toots, 50 meters before the whatever. But
What
we'll
is
put
the
that on our
pattern?
website, and then we can really, then citizens can start to gauge a little bit about, and it's the consistency. It doesn't make sense when someone doesn't blow it at all, and then it doesn't make sense when someone is railing on it for longer.
You want to speak to that, Colin?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be within a quarter mile of the crossing to provide 20 seconds of warning. The pattern is long, long, short, long. That final long has to encompass the entire crossing until the train fully occupies the crossing from one end to the other. So if they're pulling slower, you may find that last long tooth is excessive. And if they weren't to do that, if they did the just short 4 times, and they're not fully occupying the crossing, if a vehicle were to strike them or they struck a vehicle pedestrian, that crew is liable.
Not CN, the actual individuals.
Yeah.
And we have a black box just like a plane does, so we know what's happened. But we can give you some language for your website
Would be helpful.
to help explain that process. Okay.
Sorry, I've got 2 things, just a quick question about that. So if my pedestrian crossing where I am, let's say you've got a really long train, are you telling me you actually have to blow in the whole time that
Nope.
train's?
It's only from the time the
Oh, just
locomotive.
locomotive, okay, thanks. So my other observation is, once again, I live at the overpass in Brackendale, Kingswood. I have a little park area. They put a trail through there. When the trail went through that was paved, they came in and they cut down a whole lot of trees, telling me that it all has to do with your guys' mandate and your guys' policies. They took out excessive trees. A place that was very beautiful at one time is now very ugly. Also, you put in your stuff and now you guys are responsible for all this, and snow starts falling and you guys are really cleaning up. So I don't understand why you guys get to dictate all these rules and continue to affect our lives and don't seem to have any responsibility or respect of how your company affects our town.
What's the snow that hasn't been cleaned? I didn't
It
understand
may
that
be better
part.
now, but the first year when that was paved and the little yellow rails went in the whole bit,
Is this at the crossing?
right at the crossing, right in your property between those 2 rails.
Right.
So if it would snow, it's your responsibility. So the
It may
town
be
would
the
come down
municipality's
and
responsibility.
I was told it was actually theirs. And now it's being done, but for that first couple of years, because I phoned about it and talked, and they said that is your right of way, your responsibility. So it would snow and we'd be cleared to here, and nothing done over the train track.
And is this so if it's a private crossing or a public crossing?
Yeah, I believe it's ours.
Ours.
Yeah,
So what does that mean?
it's a public crossing.
That maintenance is, sorry, through the chair, that maintenance is our responsibility.
Okay, so now Squamish does do it, okay, and that's,
Yeah.
I think, what they did. A couple times there was somebody from the rail truck that would stop and clear it, but now it seems to have changed back to us. But now the other thing is there any chance of getting somebody to pay for a few deciduous trees? I've tried so many times to transplant some trees in there and it just can't work. It's just so ugly. It's just really ugly. And it used to be this beautiful green little gateway that people would come in and out of, and now it's just blah.
I would expect if there's a path, is there a walking path up toward the right of way?
Yeah.
So that's probably why they cut it, in order to be able to have sight lines.
It's probably
So,
a safety issue.
That's us
Mr. Watson?
again, that's Transport Canada, it's not actually CN's Transport Canada.
Site plan
We've
safety.
been required to clear at all crossings, so you'll see at the Depot Road, it's also been cleared.
Yeah, but it's cleared from probably about the length of this table.
But that would be the mandate from,
Yeah, but then there's still room that we can have some more,
So
some more
the
trees.
right
It's
of,
just so ugly.
I hear you, I've seen it done, it's not always pretty. The right of way actually, extends well beyond the tracks, and there's a lot of requirements that, we've alluded to here that we have to meet, and they don't always make it look beautiful when they leave, I hear you.
Doug?
Yeah, I mean, this whistle thing I know is aggravating to people, but there's a real need for that, and there's been 2 accidents I can think of at the Buckley Crossing with BCR before CN came in, and our firm was involved in one of them. I was a lawyer in practice, and the issue came around whether or not the whistle was properly blown, and that decided the deal. And so I understand, those are loud whistles, and I understand. And the problem, of course, is the railroad was here first before the houses came, and that's just the reality of it. But those whistles really are important. They are life and death things. So it's just not something you can fool around with.
We always want to whistle because we want to be safe, that's
No,
where
I
we're at.
understand.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe this is a question to the staff, with the, and I'm just thinking about people that live downtown, with the improvement project, bringing up the standards project at Cleveland this year, is whistle cessation part of the program, and is it not at all? I mean,
No,
let me just finish. Because some of the challenge right now is the way that there's a main line and then there's a spur that's no longer used. In fact, it doesn't actually connect anywhere. And the arm that went down used to be on the far side of the spur. It no longer goes down. It's no longer active. So we don't have an arm going out anymore. We have an arm over here, but we're redoing all that. And to achieve all I'm saying is there may be a fairly minimal improvement needed to actually get whistle sensation at the Cleveland intersection. And that would be beneficial for the whole downtown, I think, from that point of view. So I'm just, maybe it's through the staff, maybe we need to go back to the studies that we did in 2009, 2010 and see if we can actually, if there's an opportunity to make sure we're getting all the way to the whistle cessation if we're almost there anyway with these improvements.
Ron?
so I talked to Mr. Simmons about exactly that. And I think he may have talked to Joslyn too about it.
Probably Gary Hansen, he's our
Yeah,
crossings guy.
And the funds that are being provided for the upgrades are not allowed to be used for cessation, for the cessation improvements, so the fencing and things like that. It's still, Matt's estimation for the downtown started with one crossing at about $350,000. I think he talked to ISL and got some information. Is that right? Does that ring a bell? And so it was about $350,000.
Can we have that report come to council so we can understand what the difference is between the improvements we're doing and what it would take to get to, so we really understand the magnitude of what these projects look like.
What the lift is.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, Supervisor.
Yeah, I think that the whistleblowing in the downtown, I totally appreciate the point of houses being built around rail infrastructure, but the rail infrastructure's always been going through towns too, so I'm just wondering, same thing as Patty, I guess, that we have the numbers in front of us so that we can make those decisions. It's a health and safety issue for our citizens. It's not just about the rail crossings, the lack of sleep. I totally concur. Like having a baby, a lot of newborn babies in the downtown, and then parents can barely cope with that, and having the whistles blow at 2, 3 in the morning every single night is definitely an issue. And I know the physicians have written a letter as well. It's not just citizens complaining. The physicians have stated that this is a health issue for our citizens. So I think that it's imperative that we look at being able to fund every year at least one crossing. And I know it's going to take a long time, but we'll eventually get there. And with federal and provincial grants available, that we have to actually start doing the work.
I agree, and I think as we grow, I think that's an important thing to look at, because as we densify more, especially in the downtown area, that cessation piece is going to become increasingly more and more important.
Keep in mind too that a grade separation to an overpass is an automatic whistle cessation.
You have
It's more expensive.
Town is deciding.
And you have so many crossings in a row
That's
that it
prohibitively.
negates.
Yeah,
When you've got one half a
Right.
block away, another one's
It's
half a
true.
block.
It's true, if you have 3 crossings close by, it doesn't matter if you have whistle cessation at one, you have to look at doing them all.
And if I might, part of our compounded problem is also the logistics of where the crossings, the rail, and the schools are. And that's what we found when we did the early on engineering report, that it was the proximity to schools was a big deal, and it had extra fencing requirements and things like that.
Do you have any additional items?
There was one, actually 2, probably the most important would be storing rail cars on the emergency crossing at Midnight Way, especially distressing for the residents during the high wildfire season.
Happy to speak to that. Yeah, I get it. I live in that area, and my neighbors tell me all the time. Actually, ironically, just this week was the first time that I've seen a split car that's been laid there, and it was actually split at the north end, not at the south end. So as you may know, probably about 18, 20 years ago, the railway used to come over the tracks, go along Midnight Way, and then go back over. And the BC Rail at the time put a road through straight, so you wouldn't have to go have 2, so they could actually leave. I think they were doing a bunch of railway improvements, and they actually wanted to leave people's home, like those liveaboard things, so they have crews in the area. Anyway, so they put the road in, so that bottom crossing was closed. It was always meant to be an emergency access. It puts all of Midnight Way at sort of that beyond 15 kilometers distance for fire insurance, for example, to have to go up and back down.
Okay.
It was right on that threshold. So that emergency access was always supposed to be maintained. What happened was, being the people who live in Paradise Valley, is there was barricades put up and people would just come and move the barricades out of the way and continue to use the crossing. So I think it was BC Rail at the time actually started to took the road out. So now it's not a road to cross, so, and there's big cement barricades. When the fires happened in the summer, and we've had a few small fires caused by railway friction in the past. They didn't grow, fortunately. They were put out pretty quickly, but the train can cause fires, as you all know. And when we have these tinder dry conditions in the summer, the residents, particularly on the Midnight Way, is if it's somehow you can't go north to get out, if we have to make sure that at least we can walk across,
Right.
maybe with our babies and dogs in tow, safely, so that if cars are going to be left there for longer periods of time than a couple days, that they just be split somewhere along that way, so that people feel they can get in and out of Midnight Way. So it's big if they're going to be sitting there for. One car was there for 8 months or so, ridiculously long times. That you just create some separation so that in those emergency situations, people can get across without having to clamber under and over trains.
Yeah, we actually looked at that, and Dylan has some solutions that he was suggesting.
Yes, so that station at Midnight Way is Cheakamus. We use it as a storage siding. So when we do have excess cars, as of right now, grain cars, we put some grain in there. They store there for however long, maybe a couple weeks, couple months, could be long-term for a year. Discussing with Joslyn yesterday, we could set up something where in those high wildfire seasons, where the fire chief can contact someone at CN, whether it be myself or another route, to discuss with us, here are the peak times we're seeing for wildfires, and we can arrange to have that crossing cut. Whether cars are left for storage or not there, we could at least make the split and have the access.
Yeah. I think that would satisfy people. They just want to have that ability to get across if they need to.
Yeah.
And your other item was?
And then there was one last one where I think folks must have some concerns about accessibility and response times when referred to our public inquiry line. So the public inquiry line is manned by 3 or 4 people in Montreal, and they get 10,000 calls a month. And they also handle North America as a whole.
So they're underfunded, is what you're saying?
So they do get back to everyone, but when they get a complaint or concern, they're going to the track master or to the assistant soup and trying to gather information to get back to the person. So probably what I would love for you folks to be able to stress is, yes, leave a message and email them, because they will get back to you, but please keep in mind that this is not something that we're regulated to provide. We voluntarily provide, just as we provide CN Police as a voluntary service. So we don't have 25 people sitting there, even though we would love to. Hey, more people in my department, the better, I would love it. But we do ask for people's patience. So I think that's probably what you're hearing is, people aren't getting back to them right away. But that they are there to take those complaints. And they also do log and keep track. If there's one area that keeps coming up as an issue, they proactively look to solve that problem as well and kind of bring it to our attention. Why is this happening? Is there something we could do? Because people keep coming at it or coming to us with this information. So that was all I wanted to say about that, and I didn't know if you had any other additional questions.
To your point that you just made, I think it might help us to put something regarding that turnaround time on those calls on our website, just to say, you will get something back, but bearing in mind that we're servicing all of North America pretty much.
Yeah.
It might take a little bit.
We are actually looking at revising our response on there, and so I'm going to make a note to, the message should add
It would help
that.
to temper people's expectations a little bit.
Yeah,
Everybody expects in this day and age that somebody's going to respond to you instantly, and that doesn't always
24
happen,
hours.
especially when you're looking at the order of magnitude of your service calls.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Patty and Doug?
Yeah, and I realize the railways can't speak specifically to exactly when flammable materials are coming through. I understand the safety and related reasons you don't want to broadcast that. But maybe you could speak a little bit to, just for everyone's edification, on some of the parameters that came out of the Lapnik-on-Seek analysis, some of the changes that happened in the Act to, with regard to protocols of communication with our emergency services. We just thought it'd be good to maybe speak to that briefly.
Yeah, so Protective Direction 36 came out from the federal government, and so now what Class 1 railways, and actually bring up the app to show you, we all worked on an app that is provided only to first responders who have met the qualifications. So not just anyone can have access to this. So your fire chief, for instance, could apply to have access to the Ask Rail app. So if I am fire chief and I see a train sitting here, I can go onto the Ask Rail app and I can go, okay, what's that car number? I can put in that number and I can get the entire manifest for that train right now and know it's sitting there. I also know how to manage that product, and hopefully I've already had CN's free training on emergency response in these situations. So that's probably the best thing I think that came out of all of that. It's just preparing the first responders with the information and the education that they need to handle these situations. So the information is there, but in a controlled format. You also get once a year a list of everything that did go through your community. That list does not come through in advance, however, due to the security reasons that the mayor outlined. So that's kind of it in short. I don't know if there's another detail you want.
Yeah, no, I know a number of years ago we were told that that these types of products weren't being brought through the corridor, that there may be times when empty ones are going north, with always some residual in there, but generally we didn't have a lot. Now, I understand that there is some, like 3 or 4 times a year maybe coming through. There is a little bit of flammable.
Yeah, so for everyone's information, we are mandated to move dangerous goods. So we actually do not have a choice in the matter. If they need to be moved in this direction, then we have to do it, which is of course another reason we're so crazy about safety. With your corridor, yes, they do come through, but you're certainly not Vancouver or anywhere else. And I mean, due to the fact that this is an open and public meeting, I can't go into further detail, but offline, I'd certainly be happy to give you a little bit more
My
information.
understanding is it's not, but a couple years ago they said there wasn't any, so I just didn't want to have false.
And that would be, you should never say that there isn't any. There always can be some. And you never know what's changing somewhere down the line, somewhere else that's going to affect your route, right? Since this is an international sort of puzzle piece that we're all putting together. But in general, you are a very low risk here, I would say.
Well, it was a similar question because I recall a conversation a few years ago, and it was right after the Lac-Mégantic disaster that we had the conversation with different people from CN. And they told us that, you know, the same situation doesn't exist here. We don't have a steep grade sort of in the edge of town, right, really, to allow something like that, a rollaway to happen. But my question really along that line is, it's one thing to have them going through, it's another thing to have them stored here for any length of time. Can you speak to whether or not that ever happens, or if it happens often?
Yeah. So our trains in and out of Squamish are restricted to length and tonnage. There's no picking which commodity gets left behind if it's in a certain block. As for how long a car were to sit here, my goal is every car to be moved within 24 hours, unless it's here to storage. Dangerous commodities are never stored in Squamish, let alone on the BCR North Line, as we call it, between Prince George and North Vancouver for any amount of time as far as I've been here, and I've never heard of any plans to.
It's a more difficult terrain, right? So we wouldn't typically want to do that.
Thanks very much. Does
Thank
anybody
you.
have anything to wrap up? Any comments? Go ahead.
I just want to say thanks for coming.
Yeah.
It's important that we have these dialogues on a regular basis. You know, it's the train is an ever-present entity in our community. It's going to take some time to get to where we want to get to in terms of the infrastructure. We're sort of on a program now, but it's so much part of our community that it's really important to have these dialogues. So I just want to say thanks for coming, and they can't be just, I think this broader public discussion is important to have on a periodic basis, but it's the communication with staff on a constant basis and with the community and our staff and the community and CN that can help fix these little things that really shouldn't be part of the problem, and then hopefully move towards some solutions on the bigger things as well. And sometimes it's really obvious and it didn't occur to anyone except someone brought it up, and then it's like, well, oh, we did this little change here and that, okay, we can. So it's a conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for.
Thanks for coming as well. I mean, I appreciate it, and I get it that, you know, the train system was here first before the community really grew, but the community is growing, so CN needs to play their part as well as Squamish and even the municipal Transport Canada to help the infrastructure grow so we don't have these problems.
It is a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Exactly, and you know, I thank you for reaching out and you know, making sure that the dialogue happens. I am the only public affairs person for British Columbia, so I try to get everywhere, and I'm hoping that my understanding of local government challenges, which I do bring forward internally, is helpful, and I think it has been and will be. But we are always just a phone call away, so you know, please do reach out anytime. We are happy to, you know, work with you to try to find solutions.
Well, much appreciated, and thank you for your time, both of you, for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
Okay.
We'll move on to our last item here, actually, which is the status of recommendations to council. There isn't any, but we have a referral from council in item 6B. Notice of motion put forward by Councillor Chapelle at February 6, 2018 regular business meeting. Whereas tourism is encouraged within the District of Squamish and Eagle Viewing attracts buses and tourism from areas outside of Squamish, and whereas the District of Squamish has limited parking capacity in the Eagle Viewing parking lots by placing cement barriers which restrict in and out access for tourism buses and larger vehicles, that council will request staff to remove cement barriers at the Eagle Viewing lot in order to facilitate increased capacity for tourism parking along Joslyn Road. Patty?
Yeah, this came out of multiple comments and complaints we had from the community on, particularly on the biking infrastructure, the people biking along there. And this has been going on for many, many years. So the idea was to make it so that it's safer, so people have a predictability about where people are coming in and out of that parking lot area, but also to make sure that there's some improvements for pedestrians. I don't think it's the ultimate, this was a bit of a, we can do this and make the situation better. I don't think it's the ultimate end goal here. There's a comprehensive strategy that needs to go into place to deal with that whole Eagle Run section of Government Road. And I think Easter Seals Camp and their reimagining of what they're trying to do, they may be part of the conversation. Some of our dike work, once it's done, may ease some of the parking situation in that whole Eagle Run area. There may be some solutions on First Nations land that is worth having a dialogue with First Nations. So I think there's a whole comprehensive approach that needs to be taken to that area. I would be really hesitant at this point to remove the cement barriers. And I actually, it's right on a corner, so it actually doesn't make any sense. And I drive that road every day, and I've never seen a bus try to turn around there. It would be really problematic if buses were actually trying to turn around there. But we do need to figure out, direct them in the right place to do a proper safe turn and pull-out area for them. That parking lot, I don't think, is the pull-out area for any tourism-related buses or any buses for that matter. We need to figure out a different solution, whether they're coming from the north or the south. But this is not a quick and easy conversation. This is a comprehensive reimagining of the area, and we've kind of talked around the topic for years. And we've done some piecemeal improvements to the whole area, but I think the big picture is that, and I know that Easter Seals is reimagining their property. They had a shred a couple weeks ago with community participants. I don't know, Brandy, if you participated in that or not, about how they see their lands integrated into that whole Eagle Run area. And so I think that we're sort of at the beginning of that whole conversation and how that whole piece is actually reconfigured with all these elements in line, whether it's the businesses and the tourism elements, safety elements, pedestrians, cyclists, and that type of thing. But at this point, as referenced in this motion, I don't think it makes sense to remove the cement barriers.
So you want to speak to the motion?
I would love to, thank you. So I ride my bike across that area, and I have been doing for years and years and years. I've never noticed a problem. Everybody that rides by there knows that's the parking for the Eagle View, for the Eagle Viewing and for the pub. The entrance is now extremely small, so any larger vehicle is trying to get in, that tries to get in and out of there has great difficulty. As well, the buses are now parking the bike lane, which is way worse for me than a bus actually being on the gravel where I can park where the barrier is. So if the bus can actually just pull in on the barrier, and I totally appreciate that we've been working for solutions, but now we're in our 4th year of council, and I've been talking about it for two consecutive terms on council. I'd like to actually reimagine before we go and put in cement barriers that may fix one problem but cause another problem. And the problem of buses being in the bike lane is more significant to me than buses being parked on the side and having cars get in and out of there. It just seems manufactured. And as a cyclist, I know that when I see cars parked, I have to have that awareness. It's my responsibility. The bike lane all the way across there is in need of reimagining, for sure. But to just put in cement barriers and reduce the parking amount that is affecting a local business and our tourism infrastructure seems inadequate. So if the barrier is needed, maybe open up the space so that people can get out a little bit easier. Like just make the entrance and the exit a little bit larger so that larger vehicles, right now there's sled decks I've seen having problems. Like anybody that has a sled deck and is stopping for a beer afterwards, trying to get in there blocks a lot of the spots in there. And then when they come out, there's cars parked behind them and they can't get out. So it's like altercations are happen more in that area because of the difficulties that have just created more problems in the bike lane than less.
Randy, you're most familiar with this.
Yes.
I think, because that's your bailiwick, so do you want to make some comments on it?
Susan hit the nail right on the head. It's turned into it's just a different nightmare, I guess, that people cannot, and I know Matt's no longer doing that project. I did speak with him. I actually had a meeting with him just as he was transferring over. But he did agree that the opening is too small. You have to stop on a dime to get in if you're going north. Like, it's ridiculous. And there is no, like, you know, if you're going north, you're going into that parking lot. I mean, if you're a smaller car, it's easier. If you're bigger, if you're a truck or if you're a tour bus, like Enjoy Tours comes there all the time, you are not getting in there. Like, you are blocking traffic or you're trying to maneuver yourself in. And then once you're in, like, if you actually park at the north end, you're totally in a predicament, because if the lot fills, the way they have the barricade here to either get in or get out, whatever you decide to do on the far north side, it's not, you're blocked, because now these guys has filled up, and because of where the barricades are here, you cannot actually get your vehicle out. So the way they've put these last 3 or 4 spots are pretty much useless if that lot is full. And there's 12 spots that have actually been taken away in the process of doing that. 12 spots. So it's not, it's safer, I agree, it is probably safer for the bikers. But as in terms of pedestrians and, like, it's for lack of a better word, it's still a total shit show. It really is.
Well, it's a very small lot to begin with. Then perhaps maybe we need to take another look at just the way that those barriers are actually laid out in there.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Patty's sentiment, and you know, about the utilization of the Easter Seals camp or some kind of homogeny with them, and also the fact that the dike is going to have to be realigned at some point, whenever that may be. But in the interim, that doesn't really solve this problem right now. Patty?
Yeah, and obviously, I looked to staff for an ability to respond. I mean, if there's slight modifications to how we put those barricades in to improve the situation, I'm always open to that. I would be opposed to any sort of real reduction in safety for the cyclists, but I think there's, you know, we put it in there and we need to learn if it's working effectively, and maybe I'm looking through to Gary to whether or not how staff is evaluating that. I look at the lot, it's a crown lot. It's got a riparian area on the west side, and it may be, as we reimagine this whole area, it may be worthwhile exploring with the Crown about even finding leasing it for a couple of years. Well, the whole car industry figures itself out, maybe 10 or 15 years, and facilitate some additional parking there. There's a weird, bizarre triangle piece that's Crown. And we have to do this obviously in partnership with First Nations, as we do with every Crown piece, becomes that conversation. So, but I mean, if we need to do some slight modifications to improve how that is, or even work with the Crown maybe to make the lot a little bit bigger, if they're willing to even do that without a lease on it, maybe that's worth exploring. But I wouldn't want to see anything that would fairly compromise any sort of pedestrian type, pedestrian cyclists, particularly cyclists in that area.
Gary, do you want to touch on
Yes,
that?
I'll be blunt. We did that not to optimise parking, but to optimise safety, and it's done that. It's a lot safer.
I think it's safer for, sorry.
No, you
sorry.
gotta let yours finish.
Okay, sorry.
It's a lot safer both for cyclists and for vehicles because they're not coming out in 16 different locations. That was done very deliberately. They've got two ways to get in and out. It's a lot safer than having people back in and out of that parking lot like they were doing across the bike path. You've got pedestrians wandering here, there and everywhere. It's a lot safer, both from a pedestrian, a vehicle and a bike point of view. So I would be very reluctant to remove those barriers. Can we move them around to make the accesses work a little better? Perhaps we can, yeah. We can certainly look at that. The longer term solution is a ways away because we need the dike. We need the dike design to know where everything else has got to move to. I know we've had some discussions with the Crown around the tenure on that parcel. We haven't made any progress with them. I guess it's just not a high priority with them. So, but I would be very reluctant to remove the barriers. It's not going to get the larger vehicles in or out because the parking lot's always busy, as we've been told. It's going to be busy whether the barriers are there or not. The vehicles are not, the big vehicles, the buses are not getting in or out. It won't solve that problem. So,
Sue?
Why don't we put the bus parking where the barriers are? So the bus is the barrier. If buses are there on a regular basis, then just put one big bus parking spot, delineate it out and use the bus as a barrier so that at least buses have a place to park. Because right now, when I go across there on my bike, it's not safer. It's a whole bunch of, as Brandy said, crap show of cars stopped trying to get in and out. And now I'm waiting for them before they would just pull in and I could just go by and I would know that they were just going to pull in. Right now they're stopping and waiting and trying to figure themselves out while one car is doing multiple point turns in the parking lot and pedestrians are having to walk in that parking lot while cars are doing multiple point turns and can't see at night. There's no lighting. There's one way in and out, but before, well, one way in and one way out. Yes, there's two entrances, and yeah, I totally, if it was opened up a little bit, that may be easier to prevent the chaos that's going on for pedestrians inside the lot as people get out of their cars and walk around. But right now, you know, I found it safer when I knew that a car was just going to be able to turn in, as opposed to waiting for cars to get in the lot and parking, and buses now being in the bike lane. So that's, you know, if we can't find a place for buses to park, then the solution is to let them park in the lot until we find a place for buses to park. I appreciate that there's a future of a lot of planning that has to go on, but really to have the parking lot be a one way in, one way out where cars are now, pulling in and pulling out without looking for cyclists anyways. So it's not like they're all of a sudden realizing that cyclists are there. Has there been any bike accidents there? Like, is there a high incidence of bike problems that have happened, or was this just?
it was a source of frequent complaints, both I think before my time and since I've been here. And yes, we can take half the parking lot up for a bus stall. I suspect that some around the table might not find that a nice solution. It would consume half the parking lot
But the barrier.
for a bus that would be there periodically, once or twice a week perhaps.
Doug?
Yeah, I thought, I drive by there not as often as the mayor, but frequently at different times of the day and different days of the week, and I thought that actually provided a little bit of order out of what is otherwise sometimes chaos. And so I wouldn't want to remove those barriers. And the problem with having a bus form the barrier is it doesn't deal with the time that the bus isn't there when you are back to the chaos again. So, and people with big vehicles have to accept that there are places big vehicles just don't fit sometimes. They have difficulty getting in and out of the parking lot in front of extra foods, for heaven's sakes. So I think what we might consider doing is we can take another look at the barriers, and maybe there are some tweaks we can do. The other thing is finding another spot for buses. If there are buses, perhaps create, and I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I know there's parts of, on either side of that lot, or actually to the south of that lot, where cars are able to park on the shoulder without infringing on the cycling lane. So there is a little bit of space, and if we just declared one of those or some of those spaces bus only. Maybe make decisions like that. I don't know that there's anything on the river side of Government Road, any possibility there in the short term. I'll leave it to staff to think about something like that. So the bus would actually be going the other way, or pointed the other way, and they can just come on off the highway from another direction. So, but I don't know that you want to put bikes or buses rather into that lot. It's a small enough lot as it is. You just take up a lot of room for maybe not a infrequent visits. But the area, this is obviously temporary, and the area really does require reimagining. We talked about it. There's realignments of that road even possible or necessary in the long term, and I think it's one of the reasons I'll be happier to see that dike work done sooner rather than later, so we can get on with some of these other subsequent decisions we have to make.
I'm going to go Ted. Patty, I'm going to let Chris have the final roundup on this because I think
Okay,
kind of
yeah, thanks. Yes to almost all above. One thing I haven't heard brought up was the landowner. I mean, the landowner should assume some responsibility. And, you know, the First Nations own that property and we lease it from them. Have you said anything to them about get me more parking?
Oh, yeah. I've been fighting this for,
Yeah, no,
seriously, guys, like
but you know what
5
I mean?
years.
I mean, they right now have an empty trailer park.
Yeah, well, that's not our owners though. So that's a little convoluted,
won't go
yeah.
there then.
We don't have
But I mean,
time for
I just-
that.
understatement.
You know, it is being leased from somebody and
Yeah.
they should buck up maybe. And then to Doug's point about other places for the bus, everybody's point, other places for the buses to park. We own that lot north of you or south of you,
Yeah.
where we're putting gravel right now. And if I had an excavator there and a dump truck with 4 loads of gravel, I could put 2 bus parking stalls where the fence and the hedge is on our lot, you know, on that side of the road. You know, if you look where we're dumping gravel in there, it's 40 feet in from where we're dumping gravel or so. I mean, we could take that hedge out and make some nice gravel in and put a bus parking. And then, yeah, that's our property. And then the review that everyone's talking about, it's gotta happen. But I would prefer to go with staff's recommendation. I don't ride my bike through there. I think I did once with Patty one time. So, but safety's a big thing.
Thanks, Ted. So I'm going to go to Patty and then I'm going to let Chris give us a cap on it.
Yeah, again, I'm just looking at our GIS, and the road actually takes quite a bit of a jig jog at the south end of the Easter Seals Camp, and our road right away pops right out. It was almost like it was intended for some sort of bus or parking. So we may have the space to put some sort of bus facilitation down at the, closer to where the ramp is, across from our Chima, the old Chima property here. So that may be worth looking into from the staff point of view to do with some of the buses. I think it's also, I know Easter Seals is quite motivated to sort of reimagine and look to see if there's some partnership opportunities with the district in this whole area. So I think we'll work on a date to get them to come in and I think I believe they were speaking with staff already on the issue, or they had a community charrette a couple of weeks ago where they were brainstorming ideas on how to, I thought some of our staff was going to, and I thought maybe rep staff, or I can't remember. Tim might have gone. So that conversation's starting to happen. So I think we just we'll continue that dialogue with the Easter Seals Camp to see where they want to go and kind of reimagine this whole area. It happened by accident. You know, the Eagle viewing went in, and the Williams family started to commercialize and put the watershed in there, and it sort of happened organically without really any real strategy or thought to how. And obviously, the Eagle season is a very, very popular attraction in the winter, and so the demand is there, the interest is there, and yet we haven't really strategized the infrastructure to go around supporting that in a comprehensive way. So, but I think there's an opportunity right now as once again, the Easter Souls Campus reimagining this. There's an opportunity right now, a bit of a carpe diem moment, to see if we can actually do this. So I'll just ask staff to maybe look into that little pop-out in the road to see if there's an opportunity to do something fairly easy and cheap there within our road right away, and don't need to do any crown land. And it could be too, it could be that there's some sort of additional parking there as well, parallel or other, that may be able to facilitate, that may take some of the pressure off the parking lot at the north area. And then people doing the eagle watching thing can stay more in the south part, and people going to watershed and eagle watching going to the north one. Anyway, but I think there might be some easy, quick win solutions there for the whole area, and then get into this comprehensive dialogue with the Easter Seals.
It's going to go to Chris.
Thank you. That's a great idea on the south end and in working with Easter Seals. It seems that there's a lot of parking along that shoulder as you go south. Certainly making sure there's some room there and designated for bus either in that area to the south or on the old shoulder makes a lot of sense. We really do feel strongly that the cement barrier is really improving the safety, not only for cyclists and pedestrians we've been really focusing on, but for drivers. A bit of an aha moment for me was when one of our bylaw officers told me that they'd gone in there and didn't feel safe driving out because they just couldn't see. It was sort of a gun it and hope sort of situation, and that's important, and that's the reason that the back side of that barrier has no parking signs on it. Not only so that sled decks parked it nose in against the trees can get out, but also so everybody can see coming in and out and around the corner. So we can definitely review the ends. We'll look at the 3 spots in the north and make sure we have enough room to get people in and out smoothly. But we do feel that the barrier is important for safety. And we've talked about the master plan a few times. I just wanted to point out for context that this is the 3rd most important area from a diking and a flood safety standpoint. We're building the most important area. And so we're really looking to start developing this plan as soon as possible, because we have to get in there and actually build dikes. So we really need to figure this out. And with all the players, it's going to take some time. So it's high on our list.
So Sue, are you interested in moving a motion?
No, I appreciate everything. I really brought this forward because I want some dialogue around it, and I want Brandy to be a part of that dialogue as well. So I totally appreciate if we could open up the ends a bit, that would be amazing. I don't want parking along in the bike lanes. I don't want cars coming in and out of the bike lane all the time. I think we really do have to focus on the parking lots and keeping the parking in one area. Because when you start saying, oh, cars can park everywhere in the cycling lane, it's, that area was put forward by our public as one of the most, government road in general, as the place where people cycle and use active transportation back and forth. So to start saying that cars are now going to have to cross over the cycling lane to get to the shoulder and just park all the way along that area, now that's not a solution that I want. I prefer it done, as a cyclist, I want the parking in one place so that I know where the parking is, where cars are coming in and out. I don't want cars all the way along so I have to worry about dooring and cars coming in and out. So I want to be mindful of cycling and not start putting extra parking everywhere. But as an interim solution before we look at that entire area, I'm happy with the solutions that staff has put forward temporarily. So
do we need to rescind the notice?
It was never put on the table.
Okay, good.
But I think maybe it's worthwhile just putting a motion forward just to clarify what the direction is, because it can get confusing when motions were suggested but not put forward. So maybe I'll offer up that staff look at parking improvements along the Eagle Run corridor, including analysis for bus parking at the south end in the roadway pop-out, not good enough. And the Crown Land piece at 40050 Government Road.
And our piece.
In the old chief of
And the old cheating property once taken improvements. I mean, I think
Well,
that's a
we can do
little
it
different.
anytime.
We have a move.
temporary.
Move.
I move that.
Brian moves, second by Sue. All in favor? Motion carries. Hopefully that will help.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Brandy. for
Thanks,
coming.
have a good day.
Thanks, John.
Any correspondence? Seeing none. Roundtable discussion at all? Ted?
Thanks. We talked before about information that comes across Facebook, and I know we talked about, if some kind of hot button stuff comes up, that, staff kind of monitors it. And anyway, I don't know how that's working, but over last week, and I don't know if any of you saw that, conversation around 2-hour parking signs going up where people park for shared rides to Vancouver. And so this thing came up and I thought, I'm just going to see if staff bring anything forward on that. Because, quite hostile comments on, where I park my car to catch my ride and share, now they put up 2-hour parking signs, and where are we going to park? And I know we've discussed looking for areas for ride share. Last term we were looking. And so I was kind of hoping staff would bring it forward, but anyway, there's lots of comments right now about our parking, and I think we better get our heads around finding some areas for ride share.
Thanks. Patty, then Linda, and then
I think Ted brings up 2 points. One is our communications approach to social media, and as Christina outlined a couple weeks ago, depending on what the council wants to do, it can become an additional full-time job just to keep in track and monitor social media. I think there may be some easy solutions about just, if staff are just monitoring, just to have a list of topics discussed or something, so that there's just a list to come to council, and so we know if we don't have to be on social media at that given day when and it's just literally a bullet point. This is being discussed on social media, this is being discussed. And we can talk with communications about how onerous or not onerous that may be, but there may be an easy solution to help, I think, address some of Councillor Pryor's concerns. So it's just literally a list. Items talked on social media and not going into a full, because it's very social media is very time consuming as people are active on it, better than some. The other piece is the idea of being more deliberate about carpooling and car sharing and more proactive about promoting those things. I had a company just yesterday come and talk to me called Papa Ride, and they do a ride, a carpooling service, but it almost is a cross between, I don't want to scare people because it's not a profit-making thing, but it's an app sort of like Uber where you can go and say, I want to go here and I'm going here, and there's a small money transaction just to cover the cost of gas and insurance and maintenance. So it's not an actual payment to do it, but it helps drivers defer costs, which is, I think, different from some of these other carpooling apps. Anyway, some of the things that municipalities can do to help encourage these types of businesses is to make sure there's clear places where people can park long-term for carpool scenarios. And interestingly enough, I think we need to do public transit. Like, that's a fundamental piece for the whole transportation system, but there's all these other pieces that can become part of the solution on how to get people out of single occupancy vehicles, how to make our highway more efficient, how to bring some affordability into, particularly as Greyhound continues to just whittle away at their service, and as council knows, they've done another one just in the past couple of weeks, whittling away the service to the point where it's actually not even a service anymore. So I do think we need, and we have had conversations about where to put these carpooling pieces And so we should bring those back. We have made small improvements to areas where we'd like to see carpooling, but we can be a little more proactive about advertising them and making sure people are clear. I'm not sure where Councillor Parr is talking about this one area where it's now 2-hour parking that people used to park for carpooling. Maybe Councillor Parr can find that out, but I do think it's a bigger conversation we need to have about how do we really, how is our infrastructure supportive and supporting people's ability to carpool and car share. And I think it's a really important conversation.
In the interest of getting us up to Totem Hall on time, we'll keep it brief. Linda?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the social media, our communications department does monitor. There are certain kind of active sites like Squamish Speaks, Moms. There was a Facebook page set up around the controversy or the misinformation and concern around the BCRP property, just north here, downtown. That said, unless communications is aware of those sites, there's always going to be one that's going to get missed. And to Mayor Heinzman's point, it could become a full-time job. Respectfully, we want the community to go through our formal channels. So I haven't seen anything, I don't know if bylaw has. If someone has a concern around a parking change, if they come through our formal channels, we can formally address it. Rather than trying to communicate with the community ad hoc through Facebook, it concerns me from we're always going to miss something. Communications does monitor comments in all the newspapers, as I mentioned, those Facebook sites, and we don't respond on those sites, but on our sites we put out the correct information and link it for people.
Thanks. Sue, Ted, we're done.
Thanks, I am concerned about the parking as well. Not so much the 2-hour parking, but that we've taken away our parking in the Adventure Center parking lot. That was our active transportation parking lot. And so people have moved, a lot of them meet downtown now. All the malls now are towing. So where people used to park in the malls, which I totally appreciate is private property, but we do have to have some better communication around where people can park for rideshare, because if we know that 40% of our population is going south to or north to have work, then we need to have rideshare parking, and it needs to be formalized. So if it's not going to be in the Adventure Center parking lot, then where we moved it, I'm not sure.
Ted, you got the cap on.
Yeah, so to Linda's point, I don't mean for staff to be responding to any of this. I just mean for staff to say, oh, heads up, people are complaining about parking. The one that comes to mind was the hospital, and people were saying, man, I work at the hospital and now I go there in the morning, I can't find a parking spot. The whole place is full of car share people. And I have to park up the street and walk to work. That's one. And granted, you go up there when I have to go and get a shot or a test or something, you're parking like way down the road. And the parking lot's full. And so that was just one comment. And someone commenting on the mall where they used to parking kind of in behind or getting towed, all down the road, Pemberton Avenue, all down that road is now, because of all the condos there, is just full. So anyway, I think we should, we had a few spots like kitty corner to the Mountain Burger, there's that spot there, and we did have a few spots that we should, try to get out to the Joe public saying, hey, here's some spots.
So subsequently to maybe bring forward to another meeting that we could have an analysis of some of those spots that can be or possible, maybe for longer-term parking.
Thank you.
As an agenda item. Okay, well, getting us up to Totem Hall. Thank you, Patty. Seconded by Doug. All in favor? Motion carries. Off we go.